looking up and I can see the sky and the clouds and snow drifting on the tree. And I'm thinking how beautiful it is. And then my next thought was, wow, I'm awake. That must mean I'm alive. Shit, I'm actually good. And this wave of gratitude just kind of swept over. I've learned in my life not to be a victim, not to blame things on other people. But in that moment, I just felt nothing but gratitude.
Welcome to Noble Warrior. Join me for a powerful conversation with Mark Divine, a former Navy SEAL commander, entrepreneur, and a renowned leadership coach who masterfully blends deep spiritual insights with practical strategies for personal and professional growth. In this episode, Mark shared candid stories about confronting a near-death experience, overcoming internal and external battles, and discovering profound clarity through meditation and mindfulness in plant medicine. You'll learn how Mark's near-fatal accident became an awakening, shifting him from codependency to self-awareness and authenticity, the transformational power of meditation and breathwork to develop mental toughness balanced with emotional resilience, practical advice on navigating life's transitions with patience, intuition, and radical presence, insights into embracing vulnerability and authenticity as sources of genuine strength, Mark's nuanced perspective about psychedelics, plant medicine as powerful tools for healing and growth, and how to use them responsibly alongside disciplined meditation practices. Why slowing down, doing fewer things better, and surrendering to life's flow is essential in the age of rapid acceleration. So prepare to be inspired by Mark Divine's honest reflections and valuable lessons on living as a noble warrior, balancing strength and flexibility and harnessing life's challenges to accelerate your personal evolution. Let's get started. Welcome to Noble Warrior, Mark. Thank you so much for being here. Let me just first give a shout out to the person that introduced me to you. That is Brian Johnson. He is a dear friend. I introduced him and his wife. And then he actually had you in his conference at one point, do a remote thing. And then I was like, I want to talk to this guy, Mark. He's the real deal. He's not just a Navy SEAL commander, rah, rah, rah. I really felt your deep spiritual depth. And from that moment on, I knew that I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate you having me on. And Brian's a dear friend. What a great guy. And so cool to be a part of that community as well.
So with that said, you had just told me before we started recording, you almost died 6 weeks ago. Maybe back to what happened.
Yeah, so there's so much that gets wrapped up into a life event like that. CK has perspective to see it So I'll kind of set it up, right? I'm a warrior, right? I'm a lifetime warrior. I'm Navy SEAL for 20 years. I'm a martial artist since I was 21. But part of that was built also on top of a foundation of a really dysfunctional family. A lot of alcoholism, a lot of rage, a lot of stuff. And one of the outcomes of that is I was a pretty codependent individual. It may surprise people that Navy SEAL Mark Divine can also be a codependent. It's kind of an insidious thing, right? When you really start to understand what it is. So anyways, how does this relate to what happened in the accident? Well, I met a guy at Peter Diamond's Abundance 360 Summit, and we had developed a peer-to-peer kind of friendship, like not a deep friend, but a base conversation, talked a few times a year. And he had been inviting me to Canada. He's really into snowmobiling. He spends 6 weeks every year in Quebec. That's this get back to nature, time to decompress. And he snowmobiles thousands of miles. And he had been asking me to join him for several years. No, I don't have a need for speed or any kind of extreme adventure anymore. I was a Navy SEAL for 20 years. I kind of got it all out of my system, right? And I kept saying no. And my reason for saying no was during this time, I was also enrolled in the PhD program at Pepperdine, getting my PhD.
No shit.
Yeah, just finished my PhD. Global Leadership and Change. I finished up my PhD and he asked me again. He said, hey, I'm doing the snowmobile trip in Quebec in February. Do you want to join me? And in that moment, I didn't have my excuse. No, I'm still working on my PhD because I had just finished it. And so I codependently, even though I didn't really want to go 100%, and I knew it was like a long way to travel. And like, I probably would satisfy the thrill part probably in the first hour. And this is going to be 4 days But I said yes. So now I find myself traveling all the way to this small place, 2 days of travel to get there. And it's 20 below zero. And I'm a Southern California guy now. Even though I grew up in upstate New York, I'm pretty climatized now to SoCal. And so I'm freezing my ass off. And I have to get fitted for this like high speed suit. I look like an astronaut and outfitted with this freaking snowmobile that goes 100 miles an hour. And then we're off on the trail. And these are groom trails all run by these clubs. And it's the big deal. These sledges, guys, takes off. There were 4 of us in this group. 2 of us experienced and 2 inexperienced. I was the inexperienced. And then next thing I know, we're going like 80 miles an hour down these groom trails. And I'm like holding on for dear life. And I'm thinking, holy shit, what have I got myself into? And 4 hours into this, I had a fantasy because I also thought, based upon how he described his experiences, that this was going to be like sort of like hut skiing, but with snowmobiles. And if you don't know what hut skiing is, most people don't, but you ski from one hut to another and you have dinner and you can stay there. Right. And so you really cover a lot of terrain and then come back to your start. I kind of thought that these clubs were like huts and we would go to one, have dinner and stay. And it didn't turn out that way. In fact, we had lunch at like a gas station that first day. And I'm like, what the heck? This isn't what I thought was going to I'm eating like a power bar. And like, that doesn't sound great. Anyways, so I'm already second guessing my decision. I'm like, what the why did I say yes to this? That was really codependent thing to do. And we're cruising along and we get off to this kind of like open plain where we're going really fast. And we get channeled into this wooded area where the trail gets really narrow. It's like a 2-lane snowmobile highway. And now we're only going about 40 miles an hour, but I can barely keep up the leader. And I'm starting to feel nervous because I don't want to lose him. And there's all these kind of cross trails. And so I'm definitely going too fast for my skill level. And I round this bend and there's another snowmobile coming right at me in my lane. And I'm staring at him. He's coming toward me. And I didn't see him because we were rounded the bend and all of a sudden there he is. And so I'm looking at a head-on collision. And I knew a head-on collision with another snowmobile probably wouldn't end well. So of course, maybe feeling me, I'm like, if I can get off to the right, maybe I can make it by him. All this is happening very fast. So I peel off to the right. My sled catches the ditch. Next thing I know, I'm flying through the air.
You're flying, air. Oh, shit.
You always think about these moments, like these near-death experience moments, like some wise thing is going to come to you or you're going to have like a flashback of your entire life. And what happened to me is I just said, oh, fuck, this is happening. Like literally just said, and I don't remember, but like I was telling you before we started, I don't remember this happening, but somehow in the split second between me leaving the sled and hitting a stationary object, which was a tree, I was able to tuck and roll, right? My Aikido martial arts training kind of kicked in and I literally, or PLF, like a parachute landing fall, I did a tuck and roll. And instead of splatting head first in the tree, which would have killed me, I hit my shoulder blade. And I remember landing in the snow, soft snow, and all quiet because both snowmobiles, when I was chasing the one who ran me off, were gone. The guy didn't even stop. And I'm laying there. And I remember my first thought is, I'm looking up and I'm going to see the sky and starry, or not starry, but the clouds and the snow drifting off the tree. And I'm thinking how beautiful it is. And then my next thought was, wow, I'm awake. That must mean I'm alive. And I can tell I don't have a head injury. I can tell I'm conscious. And then I start wriggling my toes and hands. I'm able to move my legs and arms. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm actually really good. I'm actually good. And this wave of gratitude just kind of swept over. Like, wow. Yeah. And then I tried to get up. And that's when I'm like, oh, wow, I'm good, but I'm not good, right? Something's really wrong with my shoulder. It still wasn't sure what it was. I was naive enough to think maybe I just dislocated my shoulder. Anyways, not to belabor the story, but there's still some interesting elements. So I'm actually feeling very happy. I'm a little bit ticked that I got run off the trail, but I've learned in my life not to be a victim, not to blame things on other people, right? So I could have blamed the guy who invited me, the guy who was going too fast, who was trying to keep up with. I could have blamed myself for going too fast. And I could have blamed the guy who drove me up the trail.
Yeah, coming your way. Yeah.
But in that moment, this is what life threw at me right now. So I'm actually very grateful to be alive.
They make that switch, like in that moment, from slightly to gratitude immediately.
Yeah. And I attribute that to a lot of warrior training. It's such an important thing. Never to hold on to any negative energy, any grudge. Think about the master, right? Who has to actually have love for his enemy, right? You'll lose the battle if you hold on to hate for your enemy. So in that moment, I just felt nothing but gratitude And also curiosity. Like I was curious. That could easily have been the end. I wonder
Yeah.
why it wasn't. Maybe I think I've got more work to do. And more
Yeah.
importantly, you need to wake up. I can go more into why I needed to wake up and I needed to slow down. And I needed a new perspective on my life, my business. There were a lot of things that just weren't working. I even had been talking
Yeah.
to my wife about needing a break. Literally
Yeah.
before going on
Yeah.
this
You're a
trip.
powerful manifester.
Yeah,
You
I'm
just,
like, guess what? I manifested like 23 breaks because I shattered my scapula in 18 places and I broke 8 ribs.
oh man.
And what's
Oh
18 plus
man.
8? That's 26. I got 26 breaks. I only needed
Oh
one.
man.
So, anyways,
Dude.
long story short, I go to the Canadian hospital. Finally, 9 hours later, they give me 2 Tylenols, and I'm sitting there pacing. But I'm a stoic. I look fine on the outside.
Yeah.
I'm pacing back and forth, pleasant to everybody, and I'm like, "Hey, you guys got any pain medicine?" And they're like, "Oh no, can't give you anything until you're diagnosed. Here's a couple Tylenol." I'm like, finally, I get in for an MRI and an X-ray. 9 hours later, and literally within 10 minutes, the doctor comes running out. He's like, "Holy crap! It's like, you have a serious injury here. We need to get you in bed, get some morphine in you." And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, thank God. And they
Yeah.
kept me overnight. They said they can't do the surgery. They don't have the skills. They wanted to send me to some place in Toronto. And I said, no, I got to go back to San Diego to go to UCSD trauma. They're
Yeah.
real experts there. And because I had a pneumothorax, I couldn't fly. And my wife flew out to Quebec, but it was major snowstorm. And she's a Southern California person. So she's like, I can't drive through these snowstorms. That'd be even more dangerous. So check this out.
Right.
I find myself on a train with a shattered scapula, 8 broken ribs. I'm on a train all the way from Quebec City to Detroit, crossover, and then the next morning go from Detroit to Chicago. And we're going to get on a sleeper train from Chicago to San Diego. All this is like 4 or 5 days after the accident. And I get off the train in Chicago and I literally just come to an all stop. Like I just can't move. I can't breathe. I can't move. I'm like, Sandy, this is where we're staying. And we got tons of first responders. They called an ambulance and they said, where do you want to go? To the VA? And I said, no, take us to the best orthopedic hospital you guys have in Chicago. And they took us to a place called Rush.
Yeah.
And Rush, we found a surgeon who was just awesome. And you're like, yeah, this is an emergency. So you got to send in 2 days. It's New Zealand, you're Xavier godsend. He looked at it, he goes, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is a really bad injury. You're lucky you survived, but I think I can fix it. I like fixing things. So if I shared you the x-ray of his post-surgery, just suffice it to say, my nickname in the field was Cyborg. I now have the hardware to back that up. Looks like there's an erector set in there. Anyways, long story, a lot of good lessons learned from there.
Well, I'm very glad and delighted that you're alive because you're a good man and you're just overall an awesome dude. Our scheduling and actually showing up, there's a life-changing event, right? I mean, that a lot, even type of work, transformation, spiritual, whatever you call it. His life is fleeting and it really is. So
it reminds me of Nakamura, right? So my martial arts master was a Zen master, and we used to have these little kind of Dharma talks after our meditation sessions on Thursday night. In a small group that would meditate every Thursday, an hour. And one of them was he'd write the kanji character and then underneath like chalkboard, right? It was really awesome. And he would write English trends. And one of them was one day, one lifetime. I love it, right? He even had a book that he titled that was a collection of these talks. And the gist of it was that as a warrior, every day is the most important day, right? You don't know, right? If you're going to hit 30, 40 miles an hour across the snowmobile, right? Or if you're not going to make it to work because someone careens into you in the car or some crazy thing. Right. You just don't know. And so to pay really close attention to this day, because it's the only day you have. And it reminded me of when I got into the SEALs and I ran into the SEAL grinder the first day, Buds, there's a big sign that says the only easy day was yesterday. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that's the same thing as one day, one lifetime. Yesterday's done, gone. Don't dwell on the past. Today, right here, right now. So what are you going to do about it? And so in SEALs, we got really, really good at focusing on just like, what are we going to do today? And I think having these life events are good reminders of that. Every day is an opportunity for a lifetime of learning if you pay close attention.
In gems. So I appreciate this. Again, this is the reason why I want to talk to you, because often, especially people in the physical training realm, is focusing a lot on the material.
Yeah.
versus some of these principles that you're alluding to, right? Every day, today, and today was the only easy day. So I'm curious, the other side where you can see the gift yet, or you're still kind of you're still eating the gift
I am
from
still
this accident?
excavating a couple things. I think ultimately, as spiritual beings, we having human existence, our primary purpose is to grow, is to burn off karma and to become more holy. Spiritual evolution. That's our primary purpose. And that purpose crosses all human beings. And then that for each individual, that purpose is colored by your dharma, like your calling. That's how you're supposed to be challenged in life to grow. And the two biggest influences on how you're supposed to show up in terms of your calling and the challenges that you will be exposed to that will help you grow. One of them is karma, which is the energy from your past lives. And the other is your family of origin, how you're conditioned, how your initial brain structures are formed and your emotional structures and all the patterns and conditioning, including things that in Unreal Mind I call your background of obviousness, like the operating system. And it's hidden from your view. Psychology professor would call it your subconscious or whatever. And so every major event in your life has some seeds in either karma or conditioning. So back to your question, I see the gems in this incident. One of them is to help really, really examine the underlying conditioning that showed up in my business in terms of me being really codependent to narcissists who could come in and were going to solve all my problems, be the person who would take my business to the next level, and then they would steal the entire thing or half of it or whatever. And that happens to me time again. I talked to Brian Johnson about the kindness and narcissism are two sides of the same coin. And it's all has its roots in childhood trauma. So that is one of the gems, right? For me to like really just slow down and just go to the next layer of the onion and kind of that emotional development, which is so important for warriors, right? To get to that clear, still heart, heart, open mind, unfettered by any of that stuff. Another thing, and both of these can be unpacked a little bit because they're really rich. I talk about these days how culture really tends to drive us to be hyper successful, to be, look at the heroic community, to be the perfect hacker, biohacker, to have the perfect set of supplements and the perfect this and the perfect. And all of that tends to be somewhat of an addiction too. This idea of having to be perfect. And that what we really need to be doing, especially in this age of AI and acceleration and everything, is to slow down. And like what Cal Newport said, to do less things better. And so I've been talking about this in my community. I even had written about it in, I think, my latest book, but I hadn't really put it into practice. In certain ways, I trick myself. I don't take any appointments really before 10 o'clock in the morning so I can really get all my morning practice. And I do some of the time blocking that Cal Newport talks about. But when it came to and thinking about professional things, I always veered toward more and toward complexity when less and simplicity is the way to go. And so this incident has forced me, quite simply because I can't do much, to slow down and to do less things and then to be very thoughtful about what those things should be and to do them really well. And so I guess I'm a very experiential learner. I have to suffer a lot to get a lesson.
My fiance and I would talk about this. She had a ayahuasca ceremony. In one ceremony, she got a little nudge from the divine. She
Nice.
went from a wine drinker to no wine at all, right?
In one ceremony. Wow.
Behavior shift, and all that.
Wow.
Whereas for me, it took me 7 years to really neutralize the inner critic, the abuse to myself to find joy, right? I'm using myself as a tool, right? So the point is, I'm intellectually very smart, but in terms of that coachability or spiritual IQ, as you may coin that, I'm a slow learner. So when you say what you said, like, oh yeah.
I'm more like you as well. So I think guys in general are very experienced. You have to, like I was doing Sandy, my wife, kind of like walk to the edge, stare over the abyss, and sometimes even jump in order to really learn if that's the right way to go.
Click on something that you are doing. I mean, I appreciate this story and I appreciate the self-reflection because this is the way I see us as teachers, the way I see it for myself. I teach what I need most. I teach purpose. I teach, core value. I teach
Thank you.
discipline. Not because I have so much of it. Therefore, I can tell other people what to do. No, because I need it. So appreciate you sharing your journey in that you're sharing this as a like, hey, I can do better myself as well. You're not some monk from the mountaintop. You have arrived.
There's
You're
no there
also a
there,
work in progress too.
right? Never a there. Even from the when you think of the monk as one thing, you're still working. You're still working.
Yeah. I'll ask you a question. And this is like this in a way respectful. All right. You've interviewed David Goggins, Joe DeSena. You yourself teach toughness, mental toughness training through enduring physical challenging things, right? And you alluded to earlier, suffering is necessary. But is there such a point where you become addicted to pain? Where's the line, in your opinion, given that you're a teacher in this realm?
Really good question. I think you have to be cautious with influencers who push you to do more and be harder. And that's the path to getting tougher. You have an Eastern background, so we all about yin and yang, the hard and soft, the messy, feminine. They're both important, but they coexist. In Western culture, you're very young, very masculine, very outward, active, but you're not doing something. This is like cognitive behavioral therapy and hacking and personal development is all about doing things better and not doing things that are not good for you. And so that is only half the story. That's only half the equation. The other half is the receiving, right? It's the yin, it's the feminine, it's resting in your natural state. In your natural state, you are already free. You are already at peace. You are already loved, right? You are already healed and whole. So I believe that mental toughness is bringing back the balance between doing and being. This is why I teach so much that sitting in silence is the most important thing for you. Don't waste time not doing it, because sitting in silence, which any meditative practice is ultimately about, to still and calm the mind, calm the emotions, and to begin to look at the reality of your life, which is that you are spirit and you are this human being having this body and this life. And so it's both and. Advaita tradition in Buddhism means not two. It's not non-duality and it's not duality. It is both. And so in the receptive yin mode, you're tapping into the non-linear. I'm laying in the snow after that, hitting that tree, and I'm just full of gratitude. And I'm like, if this is my last moment, I'm good. But obviously, it's not going to be my last moment. So what are we going to do about that? How am I going to learn and grow from this? So there will be some doing. One of the things I'll say, I love David Goggins. Guy's very inspiring, but I kind of worry about people who take it too literally. He's an entertainer, right? Because he's gotten toward a wall. Eventually, he's going to hit it and splatter like I did against that tree.
Metaphorical or otherwise.
Yeah, metaphorically or otherwise. When the SEAL trainers would come train with us at SEAL Fit Training Center, we used to say, we were talking about mental toughness. We'd have a lot of classroom work and mental toughness, teamwork. They're all trying to be hard, like Goggins, and they're going to break. A lot of them are breaking. So I used to use the metaphor. I said, listen, if a tsunami's coming and you're a tree, would you rather be the mighty oak or the reed? And they're like, well, in that case, I'd rather be the reed because it's going to lay over. And then when the tsunami goes by, it'll pop back up. I said, that's true. So, but aren't there times where you also want to be the mighty oak? And they're saying, yeah. So I said, the reality is you want to be good. You want to be, and that's the representative. You have to have the yin and the yang, the hard and the soft. And you have to cultivate them both. In our Western culture, especially for guys, like, how do you cultivate the receptivity? How do we cultivate the feminine qualities? Guys don't want to do it, and they shy from the term vulnerability. And so the way to do that is through the warrior traditions, which especially men can really, really kind of latch onto. Warrior traditions will take you inward to find that inner peace. And now that you're all okay, you know, and you can still be a badass. You can be like the Apache Scouts said, you have to love your enemy. The warrior is the last to pick up the weapon. But if called upon to do so, you do it with a clear heart, an open mind, and with love for your enemy. That's having the yin and the yang combined.
I'm so glad you mentioned, because I run a men's circle and I'm in that space, right? And then part of it, the verbiage we use often is defend, battles, and, wing and competition. I believe there's definitely for that hard, right? And to your point, it's not to say too hard. Literally, hardness makes you brittle.
Right.
And then thus makes you fragile.
when the tsunami comes, as you mentioned earlier about the mighty oak, right? So it's about cultivation of different skills. There are times to be soft. You don't want to be like too hard to your wife or to your kids, because sometimes it's just not appropriate. In that frame, I'm with you. So I'm curious, as a former Navy SEAL commander, example people look to, how do you communicate what you just communicate to someone maybe in that I gotta be hard, I gotta be tough? Like, is that one story sufficient for them to say, oh yeah, I also moments I need to be soft and nimble?
As you can, theory only gets you so far. That theory doesn't need any transformation. Like Brian said, go from theory to practice, and then through practice, you'll get to mastery. So this requires training and practice. You have to practice being soft, just like you have to train and practice to be hard. And since most people that we work with, these men's groups and whatnot, spend a lifetime trying to be hard workouts, strength training, build these bodies. They're hardcore in the business world, and they just racking up points of success. They love to hear how much money, even if they don't overtly say it. There's all these tells about what level you're at. Are you 7-figure business, 8-figure? Right. And everyone feels some sort of like stratification or hierarchical thing about, oh, I'm not there yet. And it's all bullshit. It's all just story. And so that leads to that brittleness. You get this fragile ego. If you have to compare yourself to anyone else, you're brittle. Period. Right. If you're not okay losing everything tomorrow and being a farmer and just going on and putting your hands in the earth and growing, then you're brittle. If anything around your identity is so precious to you that you're afraid of losing it, then you're brittle. But it takes practice to be able to let go of all that stuff. So whereas the work of getting hard and strong and forging mental toughness at the yang/doing level is all about action, the practice of the yin receptivity and leading you to that inward peace is all about letting go. It's subtraction, not addiction. So it's not about action. It's about inaction. It's about being. And so it's a practice. It's not that you don't do the hard things. It's that you do the hard things while simultaneously surrendering and doing the soft things, doing receptive things, doing recovery things. And like you can choose every domain of life, and I could give you practices for both sides: financial, relational, physical. Right? You've heard the term wei wu wei. Yeah, wei wu wei. Wei means action. Wu wu means non-action. Wei wu wei means action without action. Ultimately, what we're really talking about with wei wu wei is to be able to forcefully act in the world without any attachment to it, without any sense of there being an actor. Because the actor, aka ego, has been completely retained. That's wei wu wei. Like in the concept of taming the ego or killing the ego, never kill the ego. But I'm using the ego term as like your identity, personality that says, I am this, that, and the other thing. When you can get away from and strip out this, that, and the other thing, and you just get to the I am, and you can say unequivocally and know beyond a shadow of a doubt, the only thing that's true is I am, and that anything that has anything after that is not true. I am a Navy SEAL. I am this, I am strong, I am wealthy. All of that is just ego identity. So wei wu wei is to be able to act in the world powerfully, forcefully, honorably, without any attachment to any of those identities. And in the Buddhist tradition, they would call that emptiness. I know that's a long-winded, maybe even philosophical answer to your question.
No, I mean, warrior philosophy is welcome.
That's good.
I remember who said this. Some really accomplished investor, I believe. Oh, I think it was Neville Ravikant. He is a founder of AngelList, and he essentially said, I'm paraphrasing, you start with tactics and you talk about strategy, but ultimately all discussions leads to philosophy or values, like why do you do what you do? So this podcast, we focus on the core, right? The in, like what makes you you. So our philosophy quite frequent.
That's right. And ultimately, the root of philosophy was grounded in, and think about Aristotle and Marcus Aurelius and Rose. When their conversations about philosophy, it was really about how do you live life, right? It's thought in action. I think that's why, again, back to Brian, it's nice that he's bringing it back, like philosophy is the living part of life. It's not just talking. Many people talk and don't live their words. Right.
Yeah, actually, on that note, hence why, again, I go back to you. Why I respect you so much is I see you teach, you live your teachings, you amplify that here already, right? You use yourself as a teaching moment to some things about your humanness,
Yeah.
as well as creation, the part, right? The value philosophy of teaching. So I'm actually curious if I were to say the same thing at a certain weight, but if a former Navy SEAL commander would say something, it's carry a certain other weight, right? So,
Well,
so I'm curious
gravitas,
from your, yeah, gravitas, exactly, because you're a tough guy. Anyways. So one thing that I appreciate about you is your authenticity. You're real. You talk about the real shit. You didn't just talk. It's not just about your shiny stuff, right? Your accomplishment, this and that. So if you can speak a little bit about that, because again, using the men's group teachings as an example, school of thought to say you're truly when you can have no secrets.
yes,
In AA circles, they call it because your secrets, therefore air out all your secrets as much as possible, right? Another school of thought is, hey, people can use what you share to weaponize against you. So therefore only share the real stuff, whatever you're dealing with, your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities in trusted circles.
right,
So I'm curious to know your perspective around that because you're quite open about whatever
sure,
your human struggles are, whatever your past thing is. So
yeah.
how do you think about that? Especially as a man, as a leader, how do you think about it?
It's a great question. There's several layers, right, to developing authenticity. First is the willingness and the capacity to even go there, right? So for a lot of guys, it's something they're willing to do. That's unfortunate. They think it will make them look weak. They think that they'll be judged, right? So I see this less and less, by the way, and I'm sure you do as well. You're a little younger than I am, but back when I started SEAL in 2006, like we're teaching yoga and mindfulness and box breathing. And I like had to really water it down. In fact, I called it taking the flu out of these hardcore SEALs or just rolling your eyes. And now, like they're teach the SEALs yoga and they teach the SEALs a lot of the things that I learned and developed through Unveiled Mind. And they have therapists now, right, for the SEALs.
Oh,
So a generation later, there's a lot more openness to developing emotional awareness and resiliency, which will help lead to more authenticity, more presence, and the ability to be open about things that maybe aren't so perfect about your life. So first is willingness to go there, and then to develop the capacity to be aware of where your blind spots are, where your biases are, where your isms are. And in a corporate professional setting, one of the best ways to be aware of that is through anonymous 360 feedback mechanism. I remember the first 360 that I did, sounds like getting hit over the head like by a 2x4. It's like, are you kidding me? This is how people perceive me. Like I had no
mhm.
idea. It was awesome. After I had to lick my wound a little bit, I'm like, wow. And so then, so emotional awareness, this is kind of like Goldman's EQ. Like you have self-awareness and then social awareness and self-regulation and then self-regulation. In awareness, as I mentioned earlier about the child that can get, like you go through kind of like the outer layers of feeling young, you're a work that nesting doll. And then you think, oh yeah, I've done some great work. I went to a workshop or this or that. And I've got a therapist. And we're meeting once a week or once a month. And then literally have had clients who said, yeah, my therapist fired me because he said, we're all done. I don't need any more work. And I just started laughing. Reality is you're not willing to do the work. So he fired you. And so awareness has like layers and layers to it. And you've got to be willing to go the long haul. And then, so say we're developing awareness of our trauma-induced patterns, of our fact that we transfer mommy onto this type of person or daddy onto that type of person. It's called transference. Or, right, that we're projecting judgments and repressed things. Like there's a lot going on being a human. There's a lot. Just walk into the petri dish of any workspace and you're going to get hit with it all over the place. And so vulnerability and authenticity is to be able to navigate that and to know and to be aware of how you're landing with others and how other people are triggering you and to be transparent and generous and calm and regulated enough to be able to, as a leader, manage that thick soup of human emotions without making it worse. And in order to do that, you got to lead by example. So going in there and trying to pretend to be the perfect one while everyone else is having a bad day is just going to make it worse, right? Now, the mastery level here is the capacity to be self-aware and socially aware, like be able to be aware of how other people are showing up. Like if it's in the middle of COVID, you're not going to pretend that everything's perfect. Or to be aware of when and how other people are having issues and challenges, maybe kids sick or they have an injury or mother's dying.
Yeah, be the asshole to say everything is perfect, even though you have 26 different bone breaks.
Right, exactly. But also to be relatable and be like, yeah, I'm not having a good day either. Right. I'm being challenged with this and that. And so authenticity and vulnerability is to show up as a real human being, to not put yourself above others because you're the boss or the leader or just arrogantly thinking, well, I have to pretend I'm perfect, to be real about it. But back to your question about one side and the other side, people who say, well, it's not safe to do that in a corporate or work environment because you wear everything on your sleeve. It's going to damage your reputation or whatnot. I agree with that. So mastery level of authenticity is to be able to be vulnerable in a very sophisticated way, like for instance, through humor and through acts of kindness that don't even have to include verbiage. The beginner will be authentic or vulnerable almost in a way that puts themselves down. And that's not cool either. It's doing harm to yourself, right? So you got to lead with the idea of ahimsa. You got to do no harm. Do no harm to others, but also do no harm to yourself. And here's another example. If you are in a room with someone who has never done any emotional work and is extremely critical and judgmental, and you're the leader and you're going to come in there and dump all your vulnerability out in the room thinking, that's what I heard from Brene Brown. She said, I got to go be vulnerable. Guess what? You're going to get ridiculed behind the scenes, right? They're going to be gossiping about you all day long. So that's not skillful means either. But you could be very disarming to someone like that by just dropping how you're having a challenging day and some others are because of the situation that's going on or whatever the deal is, and that it's okay. And your door is always open to talk about these things. And I need to get help too. So if anyone needs to get a coach or needs some time out to do some emotional work, I'm all for that because I'm going to take advantage of that myself. Things like that. Everyone's going to be a little different.
So gather from you is what's going to serve the room, what's going to serve the space, what's going to serve the individual.
Yeah, but you have to think about the collective energy. Right. As a leader, you don't want to do anything that brings the energy, the collective energy down. And so what you're looking for is opportunities to uplift and to remove barriers to things that are keeping the energy down. And if you're one of those barriers, that's the time to be vulnerable, right? If your energy is down or negative, then you want to come into the room and say, guys, I just want you to know I'm having a tough day, right? So just be aware of that. I might be the Debbie Downer today. I've done that with my team. Like, guys, I'm suffering right here. I can barely talk. So I'm not going to be like leading this meeting very well. In fact, Joe, why don't you take Jones leading this meeting? I really appreciate that.
When we first talked, we talked in January some point about to going to the Amazon jungle, doing a ayahuasca conference, essentially the United Nations of different tribes coming together from North America and Mexico, Peru, Brazil, all over the place, right? 36 tribes were present. It was a beautiful experience. And then you shared with me that ayahuasca was one of the beautiful experiences that you did as a way to let go of the past. So if you don't mind, maybe share a little bit about that, where again, right, talking about it, this thing to hear from CK Lens, another to hear from Mark Divine.
Maybe feel Mark Divine. Yeah, I've done 3 ayahuasca journeys. Really interesting. For me, let me back up. So someone would say, well, why? Curiosity. And for me, a warrior, like an authentic warrior into unknown territory for growth, for learning. And psychedelics, unknown territory for me. And so I had a lot of curiosity about it. And of course, a lot of fear, like a lot of people do initially. So I'm like, oh, wow. Ayahuasca can be really hard on the body, purge and get well. So my first experience, I Navy SEALed it. My box breathed through the whole thing. I was like, I'm not going to. Of course, I purged, but I think I really held myself back from kind of doing all of them. And so there's a lot of things that go into the curation of a really effective experience, the tradition and the authenticity of the shaman or the leaders is so important. The quality of the medicine is so important. The setting is so important. The other people there and their awareness, their spiritual development, their emotional development, how many there are, what they're going through, how they're managing and coaching the process, all very important. The preparation and the expectations is important. And then, of course, the integration and post experience is all very important. It's hard to get all that right. I would say the first 2 times in my experience didn't quite get that right, but it was pretty good. And then the final time was really excellent. And the reason it was excellent is because I finally, we're back to what we we're talking about, the yin and the yang. Like if you go into a ceremony, whether it's anything, it could be psychic mushrooms or, and you're going to try to control the situation, then you're probably going to get your ass handed. You got to go in and surrender. And you're just like, okay, what you got for me? Right? I'm yours. Let go and let God, like you say in AA. So that was a very beautiful experience when you finally surrender and just allow the experience to kind of like reveal itself. Amazing.
Well, on that note, Mark, I mean, hurt, let it go, surrender. These are really simple things to say and extremely hard, especially for those overachievers, super masculine kind of a any kind of practical, tactical ways to support? How were you able to finally surrender and let it go?
The biggest tool for letting go and surrendering is meditation. Ultimately, mindfulness is a process of just learning how to monitor what's coming up and then just letting it go and accepting it for what it is. Emotions comes up, you don't fight it, you don't try to analyze it, you just watch it and let it go. Right? So in a ceremony like that, things come up. Some of it's unpleasant. Fight it. Don't try to change it. Don't try to interpret it. Just let it go. The interpretation will come to you later. That's the integration. It takes a lot of meditation. So much of this conversation is awesome because we kind of hooked in the beginning on this idea of the hard and soft, the yin and the yang, effort versus surrender. In the yoga terms, stira supra, effort, surrender, effort. They go hand in hand. Even just setting up a yoga pose, there's effort and then there's surrender. It takes some amount of effort to learn how to meditate. And most people stop there, and meditation for them is a task. Check. Got that down in my morning ritual. Check. Right? I did my headspace step. Check. And so it's a doing. It's a task. And there are going to be some benefits. You get some health benefits from that. And maybe there's some performance things. Because it'll help you be more focused. So we're really talking about concentration. So when I started meditating, it was all task. It was then concentration boot camp. Right. But what I didn't realize is, especially for the Western mind, which is so busy, that's an important step. You have to go through, you have to learn how to take your mind, which is all over the place, the monkey mind, it's like a floodlight, and you have to narrow the thought stream into a very, very narrow range. You can only do that by concentrating on one thing, typically your breath. That's why I teach box breathing. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold. It's an arousal control, an attention control, and a concentration it's all packaged into one. But eventually what happens is that energy you're putting into the concentration develops capacity to monitor because you get really good at noticing when you're not concentrating on that ladder, on the box breathing. That's where it turns into mindfulness. And then in mindfulness, though, the way mindfulness, here's something I don't know many people talk about, but mindfulness is kind of the rage. And most people fail at it because they haven't gone through the concentration training first. And so what they end up doing is just sitting there and kind of thinking about their thinking, which is metacognition. And metacognition also has value, but it's not mindfulness. Mindfulness is more akin to transcendental meditation, which is monitoring your thoughts without attaching to it, right? You watch them come, you watch them go, and then you begin to realize that, there's thoughts that just happen, and then there's thoughts that I construct and create and ruminate on. And there's a completely different energy field or pattern around those. And so then you begin to develop this between your idea of who you are and the thinking that happens. And this is an absolute sea change in your life when this happens, because all of a sudden, like we talked about earlier, you can see that you are actually not the thinker. You are the thinker, but you're not the thinker. There's more to you than that. And that becomes your path to awakened awareness, because who is it that's watching the thinker? That's you. It's your witness. It's your higher self. It's your soul. It's your spirit. You insert your word for that consciousness. And so meditation first takes effort, then it's to surrender. And then that practice you bring into everything in your life, right? You're having a conflict with your loved one or your spouse, and where you want to go fix it, the old version of you, now you're okay just to let it unfold and to look at your part in it and to work toward repair without having to fix, without having to blame, without having to play the victim.
Amazing, man. Thank you for articulating that so beautifully. Singer, in his third chapter of the Untethered Soul, also describe it really beautifully. What is it? Who are you really? And then gets down all the way to the bottom of that omnipresent
Right.
awareness. So
Yeah.
thank you for that articulation.
You know,
Circling back to ceremony, what realization have you had? You're already an experienced meditator. You're already in these type of toughness, awareness ideas. So what did the medicine do for you? And
the medicine,
especially around maybe. Go.
a couple of things. I think, and this is fairly common, it helped me see my life in retrospective and to release a lot of negative energy I had toward that I perceived myself like I'm a little bit of the victim and woe is me. So you can see positive sides that you couldn't see before. Like I could see that one of the reasons that I was so effective as a Navy SEAL, and number one in my Navy SEAL training class, was because of alcoholism and the violence and the way I was raised, because I was really tough, right? And you couldn't hurt me. And the SEAL instructors like had nothing on my father, right? They just couldn't come close to his level of scare. And also growing up in those environments, like a lot of warriors come from those environments because it's extremely because you never know when the bomb's going to go off, right? And so ayahuasca helped me see all that and be like, oh my God, I see. If you believe in the spiritual being, you kind of choose your birth situation. I happen to believe that for a long time. I was like, why the hell would I have chosen that shitstorm? And the medicine helped me see that and to be grateful for it. And that led to a lot of forgiveness for my family. So that's one thing, you see and kind of relate to your past in a much more positive way. The other thing, and this is really profound, but I had already had experiences of this meditation, was this complete absorption into unity consciousness, into the feeling that everything is connected. We're all together. We're all one. And when you're really in that deep state with the medicine, like everything seems like it's just one expression of your consciousness, which is God's consciousness. And even though that's happening at the level of your mind, because it's linear, it has a linear kind of experience nature to it, it's an incredible experiential simulation of unity consciousness, which is non-linear and just pure presence. And anytime you have that experience, you bring it back with you and you never forget. It's like what's like they say in meditation, it's a pointer. And there's always that taste or that I call the trail marker also. There's that trail marker, you can get back there quick as you've had that experience. Those are probably the two most profound things. Now, I don't do psychedelics anymore because I don't think they're meant to be a spiritual practice. I think they're meant to facilitate growth and healing. And I have warned people about using it as a recurring spiritual practice, like every month. I think once a year, or if you're feeling really stuck in your life, it can be very helpful. But meditation is much better at that. And so I think our first experience with psychedelics was probably like 15 years ago. And then my last was about 5 years ago. It was ibogaine. And I went down with a bunch of vets and I wanted to experience it with them because I was recommending it to them in Mexico. And ibogaine is like the grandfather, whereas ayahuasca is the grandmother of medicine. And it's supposed to be an ass kicker. Whereas ayahuasca lasts a few hours, ibogaine lasts a full 24 hours, and you have to have a medical doctor on site and be hooked up to make sure that you're not going. But it has been known to heal addiction like instantaneously, including heroin. Anyway, so I full on like surrendered everything, and I literally had zero psychedelic experience. It was just a long meditation, and that got me curious. And then after that, they do something called 5-LEO DMT, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is the toad, right? Desert toad. And it's only like a 15-minute experience. And I had done it in the past and had a pretty profound experience. And I went through the whole thing and the same thing happened. Like zero psychedelic impact, just kind of a nice meditation. And so something's happened in my brain where my meditation has superseded the ability of psychedelics to affect me. And it reminds me, I was reading once about Ramana Maharshi, the great Indian sage. And I think it was Tim Leary or Ram Dass, or maybe both of them, that went to visit him and they brought him a bunch of LSD. And he's like, okay. And so he takes a dose or whatever you call it. And then another, he gets him like 8 or 10 doses. And he's just sitting there. And then his eyes light up and he smiles at them and he says, oh, I see. You want to feel powerful. That's what he said. You want to feel powerful. Because they were hoping that this great Indian sage would validate them that psychedelics were the same as meditation, brought the same benefits. And psychedelics are operating at the level of the ego, the mind, and meditation takes you beyond the mind. So that's kind of where I'm at today. I think psychedelics are useful at the level of the mind to help heal your orientation of the past and to give you a taste of unitive experience. But it's not the same as awakening. It's not the same. It won't get you there.
Let's use the snowmobile as an example. It's full, right? It takes you from
Vehicle.
point A to point B. Now, for
Mm.
you, your vehicle is used now supercharged turbojets, whatever you in terms of meditative state, right?
Didn't
Nice,
save me
but
from
you
the
know, yeah, it's like a bicycle level, and it's like,
right.
yeah, not interesting for you anymore. Use them for you, and just like any tool, it's the way I see it. I'm agnostic to it. I'm not, shall we say, attached to it. It's effective tool,
I think so
but it's
too.
not the only tool,
Just
right?
make sure
So
what it's used for and its value, not to
exactly.
get attached to it or addicted to it. And oh,
So
by
let
the
me
way,
actually go
I
ahead.
just want to kind of double click on this. And my friend Ben Greenfield has talked about this at length, to be very, very thoughtful with who and how you do it, back to the place, the setting, and the person and the quality. Because in the wrong
Yep.
setting, in the wrong place, in the wrong quality, in the wrong people, it can actually probably do harm. And I think some people have been harmed, and this is why Ben's been warning about it, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. It's not
Yep.
something you just like dive in without any research.
Agree 1,000%. Again, bringing back that vehicle metaphor, there is the driver, right? So if this facilitator isn't skilled, isn't ethical, is fall and can drive the bus off a cliff, so to speak,
That's right.
metaphorically, right? So it's important to choose who you're entrusting your psyche, who you are with, So I agree with
Definitely.
100%. Yeah. That I'm curious because you also had mentioned your daughter who is in training, this path very seriously.
Right.
So given you just said, I'm curious, how do you support your daughter with this path of what she wants to explore and do and path as a service? How do you about that? How do you advise her?
It's an interesting way. She actually has a lot of resistance to it because on a cognitive rational level, she resists it. But every time she does a ceremony, the shamans tell her that she's a shaman, that she's a healer, a medicine woman, and encourage her not to deny her calling. So I think she's done like 36 or 40 ceremonies, probably more. And she's on a 3-year path where they combine vision quest with ceremony. Every year, the vision quest is longer and longer, up to like 14 days, where she's continuing on the path, but still hasn't quite figured out how to integrate it into her kind of professional identity life. And that's okay. And she's now enrolled inspired by my late in life jump to get my PhD. She enrolled at the California Institute of Medical Studies in a PhD in East-West psychology. And so I think she's going to find the container there to bring this kind of medicine work into her professional life. So I'm very supportive of that. And she, with everything that we said today, she would fully agree with. Like we've talked about that quite a bit. And she's very clear that she's not using. The example of using it was like one of the places I went to was in Kona on Maui. And they were like organizing a church. And everyone was there wearing a white robe. And they did it every weekend. Maybe it was every month. Actually, I shouldn't say every weekend because I don't want to speak out of turn. But at least every month, like one day, they all got together and this was like their ceremony. And I know just from talking to a lot of them, like a lot of them were doing more than that. And I think that leads to personally, again, I don't want to be judgmental or critical, a lot of spiritual bypass. They're not really doing the work. Because at a personal level, I found a lot of them very hard to engage with, like you're almost cultural. That's
To one of the things that we say in life about dosage. So, and then also as well, right? So, because water is amazing. If you have too much water, too much
can kill you.
oxygen, it's going to kill you. Right. And also your intent. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this to quote unquote do the work? Are you doing it to escape from reality? To
Right.
our very early point, it's about philosophy, but also practice, right?
Right.
So that's awesome. Curious too, because a lot of people I speak to, my students, do this podcast during transitions. Hence,
Right.
this podcast is a lot about transformation. right, in transition because maybe they sold their business, maybe business fail or their marriage fail, or may have a health crisis, whatever the case, right? There is some kind of opening for realization of what is it that I really want to do? What is
Right.
my new identity if I'm no longer the CEO of this company and this and that, right? So part of the journey is to mind, to your point, clarity of what to do next. So I'm
Right.
curious if you have any other thing that you wanted to say about guiding others who may be going through transitions and transformational process and right, maybe
Right.
if they are lucky they find in school a guy, a teacher like you
Yeah.
this podcast and have some clarity there, but there are other can maybe give some wise words to help them navigate going through this transitional period. They're still formulating.
Sure.
I don't know what their new direction, their new identity is.
Well, of course, there's a lot of practical tools, and I'm sure you've once tapped into those. But I'll kind of approach this from a metaphysical perspective. First off, transition is natural, right? And there's going to be, like, you want transition because it shows that there's growth happening. However, it can be scary because we go through a phase of our lives where we invest a lot of energy in a particular phase, which means job, career, identity, certificates, degrees, building businesses. And I'm sure, like with your men's group and the clients I've worked with, like it becomes not only just ego attachment, but also quite literally like real world necessity that transformation can jeopardize a lot.
Right.
Families, finances,
Family, employees,
yeah,
yeah, people
employees,
who depend
exactly.
on them, etc. Yeah.
Right. And so you do want to be very sensitive to that. It's not an all or nothing thing. Transition, and it's like a ripening of a fruit, right? You got to be very, very careful not to pick it too soon, or else it's going to have a bitter taste. It's going to be impossible to eat. And so a lot of people get impatient with transitions. And so my first recommendation is this, just to really be patient and just like until we say slow is smooth, smooth is fast. When the moment is ready, the fruit will fall from the tree automatically. It'll be effortless. There's a Japanese concept called shibumi, effortless perfection. So you work on it, you visualize like, and you invoke your future vision. And this is the metaphysical part. Like there is an aspect of you that already knows what's on the other side of this transition. So ask it, get yourself really quiet and open your heart, right? See the soul and ask your future self, who am I? What's on the other side of this? Who's the next version of me? What's emerging? Show me what's emerging. And what happens when you get this oftentimes like very subtle, soft imagery or sensations. My very practical example of that is when I was in my early 20s, I was working on Wall Street at Cooper's, not PricewaterhouseCoopers, going to NY Stern School of Business, getting my MBA and studying karate with Nakamura, who got me to study Zen. And through the process, sitting down, starting on one time a week and before and after karate, then I started every single day for about 3 months. It was awesome. So I bought myself a bench and started meditating every morning. And I went through that process I described earlier, concentration and opening up the mindfulness, started to see the story that I was living. That wasn't my story. I started to ask better questions. And when I got to that phase of asking better questions, I started to ask, well, if I'm not meant to be a CPA, MBA, business guy, who am I? Right? That's the perennial, that's the dangerous question. Who am I? Who am I really? And I started asking that question before my meditation. And by then, this was about a year and a half into my practice. And I was able to get into that kind of non-dual state where time just stayed still. And anytime I came out, it's kind of like we were talking about with the ayahuasca, I came back with some information, some sort of sense of knowingness that I didn't know before. And I kept coming back with a sense of knowingness, and I was a warrior, and I was meant to be a warrior. Now, mind you, I didn't come back with like a Navy SEAL trident blazoned on my chest. I didn't even know about the SEALs, but warrior just stuck with me. And I just had this imagery come up of being a warrior. And that's what led me into the SEALs. So whenever there's a sense that transformation is happening or needs to happen, pause, breathe, go back to your meditation cushion and bench and get to a place of radical stillness and ask the question of your future self, who am I? What's trying to emerge? And I don't know a single person I work with that hasn't gotten some answer if you're patient enough.
Yeah, I appreciate your answer. Again, coming from me means a certain weight. Coming from Navy SEAL commander means something else. So I appreciate you answering that question beautifully.
You're welcome.
You pray, by the way?
I think prayer is very important, not just for those who grew up in religion. The question is, who or what are you praying to? And so everyone's going to have a different relationship with that idea, that notion. Kind of like you referenced the 12-step programs earlier. I'm familiar with all of it. You say, connect to your higher power as you understand it. Right? So if you have a relationship with God as an other, then you're going to pray to that God as an other. If you have a relationship to God as all things, the ground of being, the essential nature of all things, then essentially you're praying to yourself. And that's just asking, like, your higher power is the same higher power as everyone's higher power. And so prayer really is like an affirmation. Because prayer should also be really for the good of humanity, right? You don't want to be praying for a Ferrari or the deal works out.
Please give me a Ferrari. Well, but that also, whoever is making that prayer is like a begging, right?
That's right.
Useful.
So, the being, right, there's two, like, you can even say there's two phases of life, but also there's two types of people in this broadest category. There's graspers and there's givers. And so you want to pray as a giver. One thing, like, when we look at, like, what's the idea of practice, which sadhana, right? What's the Sanskrit term for a practice, a life practice? Chugyo is an old Japanese term. There's a number of things that are just like you. I've tried a lot of different things. And ultimately, there's a lot of things that are called different things, but aren't actually the same thing. It really distills down to a few really simple practices. And one of my teachers, although I never met him alive, was Dr. David Hawkins. He said, just choose one. And Ramana Maharshi and Maharaj would say the same, just choose one. But everyone's going to have like a different orientation, like what's really effective for them. And one of them is clearly meditation, like just singing and doing stuff. And of course, you could say, what kind of meditation? But they all lead to the same place. And the idea of meditation is to calm your mind, get out of your thinking mind, and tap into your essential nature, the part of you that's already free. Right? So that's that meditation. Prayer is the path of devotion. Meditation is the path of the mind. They call that jnana yoga in Sanskrit. It's the path of the heart, and they call that bhakti yoga. Devotion, like praying to an other heavy relationship with Jesus or a guru. And so for a lot of people, that's the most effective path. And then there's karma yoga, which is the path of service, doing good works, like Mother Teresa was a karma yogi. Like she just did good. And through her good works, she just elevated herself. It's spiritual. Like Michael Singer's Dr. Hawkins read a whole book called Surrender, Cross or Surrender. And it's just phenomenal. Or Letting Go is called Letting Go. Surrender Process and Singers and Dr. Hawkins and Letting Go. Both of them are excellent resources for learning the path of surrender. And this is the path of radical acceptance. Whatever comes up, observe it, and let it go. Just accept it as it is. And it is become. And then there's a path of loving kindness, and there's the path of forgiveness. So this is like Jesus' Course in Miracles. So I like this integration. I'm a big integrator. So my whole program on Beyond Mind is path of integration. Because I like to accelerate. I don't want to have any stones unturned. And I feel like this lifetime is your chance. And so I practice karma yoga, service that we give people through our teaching, my podcast and my books. And I practice forgiveness. I study the Course in Miracles every day. And I practice prayer and I practice meditation through that non-dual awareness and awareness. So I practice it all and put it all together into a morning ritual integrated practice. And then an evening ritual integrated practice. So it's very powerful to have a few vectors instead of just one.
Yeah, the big questions and little questions. So that was a little question first. How long do you meditate and meditation? Really bad question because
no, it's all right.
The answer is probably depends.
Okay, so structured like seated meditation, eyes closed. Minimum 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon. Sometimes longer. And throughout the day, there's for my clients at home spot drills, but there's just pauses, moments where I just pause and really just feel my mind and become really present. That's my breathing. And ultimately, meditation is meant to be something that is not done, but is with you all the time. We call it taking it off the mat, right? And so that has become kind of a permanent practice for me. But even right now, like I'm observing and witnessing this conversation and witnessing words coming out of my mouth without any intent to formulate what they are, being brief on what they might be. And that's meditation, that's mindfulness. And those are the ways.
So, okay. The reason why I ask, do you pray, is this, right? Because again, it's the yin and the yang. I'm curious to know how you think about it. I'm a pretty cerebral person. I like
Okay.
process. I like systems. I like recalling facts and like that because that's how I was trained. PhD engineering realm, right?
Yeah.
And that in itself arrived to a certain decision point. It's very helpful to have those frameworks help me make decisions in life.
Right.
Now, as I get deeper into my spiritual path, the devotion, the download, the whatever you call it, there's just like a station with the divine God, oneself. Again, different names or different things,
Yeah.
just more direct, right? So I'm asking this question selfishly because I'm how do I say this? Let go of this because this being my security blanket and trying to do more of this. I'll actually get, okay, this is probably the more direct path, more efficient path, more energy efficient path. Curious to know Mark Divine's perspective. Do you just pray and forget about analysis, or do you do analysis then pray, or do you kind of do a mix of both, or the situation dependent?
So both, right? And analysis or metacognition, thinking about your thinking, the quality of thinking is important. So for me, that occurs through journal, which I forgot to mention before, is nice practice that leads to a lot of clarity and is a really nice supportive practice for deep spiritual work. So contemplation, metacognition, and journaling are all really kind of the same thing. If you do journaling, reflect. And effective journaling is really kind of like what's the book? Anyways, unstructured, like stream of consciousness brings out surprising things. That's one way to do it. Another is what we call recapitulation. And this is retrospective. So we encourage people to do it every day, to recapitulate your day. And it's kind of like an ABC debrief. Just go through your day, visualization, and say what went well and what didn't go well and what did I learn? And it's also a great way to eradicate regrets because you can see, oh, I made a little there. I can go make an apology, or somebody really did something shitty to me. I need to go address that in a graceful way. So you just clean up stuff along the way. So that's what you would call analysis, or another way to use kind of reflective thinking. It's a process. I find that to be very useful because it gets concepts out of your head that otherwise would linger there. And you got to understand, like, meditation is the movie toward the non-conceptual. Non-dual is non-conceptual, right? Someone asked me, is like, if you have an insight, is that like awakened awareness thinking? I said, no, that's your mind thinking, but it's thinking with new information, with just access to, like opening the aperture. So you have access to more knowingness. It's the difference between knowledge and knowingness. Analysis, metacognition, journal, it's all working with knowledge, which is at the level of the mind. Whereas meditation is working at the level of knowing, which is beyond the conceptual. One of the biggest obstacles spiritual development is knowledge, or the obsessive clinging to knowledge. And from one PhD to another, I say that with all kind of knowing that people like other doctors are going to be like, what are you talking about, Mark? Knowledge is power. Knowing. Like here's my example of that. Like I've been teaching developing leaders now for 30 years, and I go to Pepperdine to study leadership. And like I write all my papers without a single needing to find a single citation. Then I have to go back and fill in the blanks, fill in the citations, because like I have a sense of knowingness about leadership, which is rich and deeper than the professors who are teaching there. It'd be very different than if I was 20 and going to learn leadership. I would have had to study all the scholars and build the lattice work of the different lenses that they viewed things through. And all of that was interesting to me. But I could very clearly see all these are just concepts. They're just theories. They really have nothing to do with knowing leaders or how to develop leaders. Again, then back to theory to practice to mastery. Knowledge is just theory. And you can work with the knowledge and embody it. And then you own that knowledge into something that's part of you. You don't have to cite somebody. You don't have to dust off your perfect model. You don't have to have the perfect analysis. It just is who you are. And then the more you work with that, and especially teach, right? I was going to make that comment earlier. One of the best ways to mastery is to teach it, even if you don't think it right. And that's how you get to mastery. And knowingness, teaching from a place of knowingness. So when I give speeches, I don't use PowerPoints or notes. I mean, it's a great question for very practical reasons and one kind of emotional reason. And I was very aware of these reasons, one of the reasons. I was enrolled in my PhD at University of San Diego in 2000. And in 2003, I was the way through like 56 credits. And I got mobilized to go to Iraq as a Navy SEAL, lieutenant commander, reservist. So I had to pack up and go away for a year and put it on hold. And while I was in Iraq, I was doing my practice every day. So every day I would do my yoga, my meditation. And war has a way to really crystallize your thinking, because of the intensity and the fear.
Yeah.
And what I saw in my meditations while I was over there was that I really didn't want to be an academic scholar. And that's what I was thinking before that, because I was, again, doing. And I didn't have the time to sit and think, do I really want to be an academic? So I realized I didn't want to be an academic scholar, like professor, university professor. I wanted to develop leaders, and leaders aren't developed in the class. So when I came home from Iraq, I left University of San Diego and I started SEAL to develop. Now, fast forward to 2019, I'm like the OG in Navy SEAL leadership space, right? I've written a number of books, blah, blah, blah. Had great success. But now there's like 6 or 8 other SEALs doing the same thing, right? Same concepts, all read my books. And of course, they have their own legitimate experiences. And some of them maybe like way better at marketing than I, Jocko Willings and David Goggins. And I'm growing so fast as a result of all of the work that I'm doing, that the whole SEAL thing was just like so far in my past that it really was disappointing for me. And yet my business is called SEAL Fit. I have a couple of books that reference it. The markers keep trying to pull me back. You always lead with Navy SEAL. Even to this day, it was driving me crazy. So I'm like, well, I don't know how to lead.
Which I did as well, reference
it's
a
so
few
normal.
times.
I forgive you. Practicing my forgiveness here. Here I am. Part of me is like, I should have finished that PhD, right? So that I could at least lead with that. Another part of me was like, I need to have some credentialing now to change the story of the brand personality, the personality brand of Mark Divine. Not who I am, but the story. So Mark Divine, PhD, Dr. Mark Divine, and then you get to the bottom of the website and he says, oh yeah, he's also a Navy SEAL commander, #1 in SEAL training class, and he's training thousands of SEALs. That's kind of cool, right? Change the story. And then I'm always a big proponent of challenging yourself, regardless of your age. And I hadn't had a big challenge in a long time, like the scary kind of challenge. So I rolled and did it. And after I said, it's a lot of work. I'd rather go back through SEAL training than do it. You sure? Stand by for the next 6 years of your life on hold.
Exactly. Well, I mean, to your point about training leaders, and do you teach these days from a more intuitive place, or because again, tell me if I'm projecting.
Yeah.
The way you talk, I get that it's more intuitive. It's more from experience and embodied practice personally and training otherwise. So how practical or useful really is from these academic theories that you use to train leaders?
They're useful for people who aren't training intuitively yet, or teaching or coaching. They're useful for students to know that the content that you're delivering is grounded in answer modeling. And so, so like all the models that I've created for MD Online are grounded in some sort of theory. We use Ken Wilber's integral theory. We use vertical development theory. And we have a lot of grounding in that, but I teach it from a very intuitive place. In a sense, it's getting harder and harder for me to kind of fit even into the mold of my own structures, the unbeatable mind coaching. That's why I'm much better at like the
I'm an ocean.
I love that. Yeah.
As Rick says.
Right. I have to like contract myself to like pull out the model and reference it, stuff like that. But that's all good. That's just part of the process. Becoming more whole. And you operate from the wholeness instead of from the limitation. And the whole includes all the parts, right? So you can reference the parts, you can find them, but I find mostly they're spontaneously there. But oftentimes I don't necessarily like remember the scholar, right? Or the near, stuff like that. My memory, the more broad and expansive my mind goes, the less it needs to hang on to memory, which is really interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, that's one really.
And I think especially after COVID and everyone getting like so Zoom burnout, you're looking for direct experience in person as well. You get quite a rich experience through virtual, but it's nothing compared to being in person. So I think you're going to see a real kind of reversion back to in-person live events and coaching. I try to get in-person my coaching clients a couple times a year because I'm like, this can't do virtual all the time. You know, we have to be together.
Questions, if you don't mind. Question I want to ask you. Given what you just alluded to earlier, you didn't say this, I said it. I'm an whole drop, right? I'm not drop, right? Challenge is when I have a student ask me a question, I but wanted to give them everything that I got,
Mhm.
knowing that it's impossible to give them what I have learned, just content and also wisdom. So I'm curious for you as a teacher, especially, it's a testament on this podcast. How do you gauge how much, how deep to go
Yeah.
into when someone asks
Um,
you a question?
it's a very intuitive thing. So when I coach, my main job is to stay radically present, just listen. And when you're listening, I get information not from the person, but also from source viewers. And quite spontaneously, information will come to me, and that will be what I share. And sometimes I will deliberately support that with some knowledge base, but I try to keep it pretty much about them as opposed to like how smart I am or how much I know. Because I think what you're alluding to is like too much drinking from the fire was can actually be very confusing. And then they miss
Right.
the forest for the trees. Right?
That's
There's a
right.
gem there, right? So the download that you get as a coach is the gem. And you don't want to corrode it with a whole bunch of other stuff. You want to give it back to them and then have them work with it, reflect on it, and come back and see the insight. You got it. You got this.
One last question. All right. AI in the very beginning part of it. How has AI supported or help you, one, to process your own data analysis, insights, blind spots, inspections, and or your own development?
Yeah. Well, I'm still just starting to learn how to use it. The fact is extraordinary and it changed everything. I'm quite stunned with what these models can do. I'm curious about how it's going to affect content creators because some people recreate everything that took 20 years to create in like 20 minutes with ChatGPT. It's certainly sped things up. Like I was working on a business plan. I had this idea that I was going to get serious and raise money for stuff that you really take it out to the world. And I rode that wave for a while. And I was thinking, well, it's going to take me, I'm not going to build a business plan. I should actually reach out to Brian Johnson. She said, no, send me what you have. And I got this prompt model I built for ChatGPT. And in 10 minutes, I had a business plan. Like, what the heck? It saved me weeks of work. I wasn't like fully fleshed out and refined, but it was pretty good. Then I tabled the whole idea because, like I was saying earlier, it didn't really hit the hell yes. I really want to go in that direction because there were too much about my past. So I'm still kind of sitting with like, what do I do with seal fit when I really am going forward more with my leadership development coach? And AI, I just am fascinated by it. There's a lot of fear and uncertainty and doubt. Again, if you want to pan out metaphysically and spiritually and okay, everything it really is consciousness. And so human beings are like points of consciousness or address books and consciousness. So your perspective and my perspective being perceived in two different addresses. Well, so is a rock, right? So is a tree. So is a dolphin. And why wouldn't AI also be consciousness? It doesn't mean that it's self-aware yet. It could be. Just like a dolphin can be self-aware, or a dog self-aware. No. If consciousness is always moving toward goodness, toward more love, the more advanced, the more complex consciousness gets, the more accessible it has to awareness, which is pure light. Then I would have to assume that AI, as it becomes more evolved, or even self-aware, i.e. its complexity grows, that in love quicker than humans. So the fear that AI is going to be doom and gloom and Skynet take over humanity, enslave us, I don't see it happen. Right? That's my spiritual hope. I'm not wrong.
You're speaking to an optimist, but obviously a very privileged person, smart,
Right.
PhD, talking to really amazing people all the time. So I'm constantly thinking very optimistically and then so I'm reminded of what could, quote unquote, the worst case scenario could be. So, but anyways, it's all perspectives.
Right.
Mark, last question. Are there things that I know that we ask a lot of different questions? Are there questions that you hope I had asked I didn't ask?
That's pretty funny. No, I am trying to avoid expectation hangovers, so I didn't have any expectations. I love these conversations. Just to start with a blank slate. But if you were to ask me, what do you tell your clients is the most important thing to do? Here's how it is. Slow down and spend every day, ideally twice a day, if not at least 20 minutes in the morning, and just watch and breathe. Just breathe. And if you want to box breathe, that's even better. Inhale, Like, hold your breath, like, exhale, hold your breath. Hold your attention on that. Hold breathing block. Don't judge yourself. Just hold your attention. Just do that. If you do that for 3 months, report back to me. I'll tell my clients. If you can do that every day for 3 months, you'll be a changed person. And everyone who's had the discipline to do that has reported back for transformation just in 3 months. And that's the beginning. So that's the question. I wish you was.
Let me just take a moment to acknowledge you. Thank you for how you're showing up here, especially after a life-threatening accident.
You know how much energy I have right now compared to normal? Like 20% battery operating here.
Oh, man.
I'm like, I haven't slept in days with my shoulders get slaughtered, but it's really fun. I had a great conversation with you. I really enjoy your style. Man. I like how you don't rush. So many podcasters either are formulaic or they kind of rush to get a question out. And it's really important for the audience, for both the interviewer and the interviewee, to be in this kind of measured kind of dance. So that you can feel into these two are really, really engaged and not just like trying to impress each other or get as much energy hour that they can. So I think you just did an outstanding job there. And you also are very authentic and humble. Noble warriors should be humble, of course. Good job.
So much for showing up so generously, so wholeheartedly, so authentically. I know that we went a lot of different directions, but I really appreciate how you use your life going from Navy SEAL to Navy SEAL commander to now leadership trainer, PhD, Dr. Mark. Thank you. Just generosity all around. I so appreciate you. I look forward to seeing you in person one day very, very soon.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation. Booyah.